my name's Kara, and this week is the last week of me being a full-time knitter. So tomorrow I will be starting my full-time job, and I am very scared. It's not going to be, I think, that big of a transition at first, just because I'm going to have to go through orientation, so it's going to be some time of that, and also I will be working remotely mostly, I think, so I'll still be in my home just as much as I was before. Today I just spent most of the day just running errands. I'm gonna treat myself to a massage because it's the last day of freedom, so why not? And yeah, it's raining, as you can tell from my jacket. I don't have a proper raincoat yet, so what I've been doing is I've just been wearing this hoodie and putting the hood up. And it's not very effective, but it works. I'm just gonna wash the hoodie after. I do have a raincoat, but I didn't bring it with me, so I might have to get a new one. But yeah, I'm still otherwise just in the process of organizing myself. I think the issue is that my room is big enough for me to keep a mess in it and just leave it for a while. But then I feel very disoriented or just not very settled when it is very messy, but I haven't found the time or the energy to clean everything up. I definitely had the time to clean things up, I just didn't have the energy to do it. Now I am currently waiting on more under the bed storage, and so what I've been doing until then is just shoving bags of yarn underneath the bed. And the tricky part of that is that it's not necessarily easy for me to remember or see what I still have, so then I might overorder yarn, but it seems to be working for now. And again, I am super glad that I have a really big stash because I knit a lot, and the things that I knit tend to take a lot of yarn, the volume of it is a lot, so yeah, and I guess I'll just show you guys that today. But as a reflection of my summer of knitting and content creation, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was super nice to just be able to have the time to just knit something that I thought of immediately and just be able to work on it all day because I could. But I also think that it'll be good for me to have structure and have another job, just so that I can appreciate my knitting and designing a little bit more, because I think that if I was a full-time designer or a full-time content creator, it would just be exhausting. And right now I kind of view knitting as a fun hobby, it's a break from actual work, even though I do kind of turn it into work. But look, I don't view coding as a hobby, so I think I need my software engineering job to balance out my knitting, just so that I can appreciate knitting a little bit more. And maybe I'll even start to think of my software engineering job as an escape from knitting. That doesn't necessarily seem likely, but maybe. But I definitely plan to keep on designing and knitting a bunch, even though I have a full-time job. There's no way that I'm ever gonna stop. I was doing all of this while I was a full-time student too, so I don't think I'll have too much trouble balancing it. I think it'll be a little bit trickier because I'm now balancing New York and just things that I want to do in New York. But hopefully, because it'll be cold soon, I won't be as tempted to leave the house. Although I do want to leave the house, but I'll probably still have a bunch of time for knitting. But yeah, let's just get into knitting this week. So I'm going to show you guys the project that I just started last night, and it was while we were watching House of the Dragon, and then I started watching the Jeffrey Dahmer show as well. And it is very scary. And I'll say that one time for school I had to read my friend Dahmer, the comic book, and then I kind of got into a black hole of reading the Wikipedia page of Jeffrey Dahmer, and it made me so nauseated that I vomited. I don't know. I'm trying to avoid that while watching this show, so I think I'm just really focusing on knitting while I'm watching the show. But it is a very good show, and it is very scary. Anyways, here is the whip that I was working on, and it's in Wool and the Gang Alpachino Merino and Cameo Rose and Ivory White. And it might look like a Stripe Me Down sweater, but it's actually going to be a Marco Polo sweater light. I just decided to make it striped because, I don't know, why not? I think I was being kind of inspired by rugby shirts, but I'm going to just finish out the body, and it's gonna look pretty similar to a Stripe Me Down sweater, but it's going to be collared. And I'm really excited because I think that this might be a piece that I just wear all the time, because the last time I made a piece like this, which was the Stripe Me Down sweater, it was my most worn sweater. And so I'm really excited. I love working with this yarn. It's so soft, and it's so satisfying to go through the entire skein at once. And this is about 2 skeins worth so far. I'll be honest, I am not amazing at estimating the amount of yarn that it takes to make a sweater. Thank God for my test knitters, because I can really only be sure about the sizes that I knit myself, the piece that I make myself, And even then, sometimes it's kind of like, it's not super consistent, and I think that just kind of depends on the yarn that I use, the tension that I'm knitting with at that point of the day, and also like maybe like the skein itself. Recently, I've been doing this thing where like I'll use my electric skein winder to skein up like skeins of yarn when I'm holding it double. So I'll just like pull from the center from both of the skeins and just like put it into one skein. And I've noticed recently that there's pretty big differences between like individual skeins, like even if it's the same yarn, same lot and everything. Like I know that most like yarns say that like, oh, like plus or minus like 5 meters. But you never really notice that until you're holding them both double and you realize that like one's gonna go like way further than the other. I don't know if any of that was comprehensible, but anyways, I really recommend, if you have an electric skein winder or even just any sort of skein winder, skeining up your yarn when you're holding it double just to make your life a little bit easier so that you can get rid of that like possible entanglements earlier rather than later. So yesterday was a very productive Sunday for me, and I actually ended up like finishing this super chunky Valerie sweater, or it's just a chunky Valerie sweater. It's not super chunky, it's maybe super chunky yarn. But this is in Malabrigo yarn, Rasta yarn in apple green, and obviously this is my favorite yarn and I really, really, really love working with it. Sorry, I keep on shaking my desk. My desk isn't super stable, but I really, really, really love working with this yarn because it's super soft and it's just the color for me. This is my favorite color of yarn like ever, and I really, really love working with it. But this was the first time that I've actually worked with chartreuse since coming to New York, which it was like a month in, so I needed to fix that, and that was kind of too long, honestly. But I have about a full skein left of this yarn because I decided to make a small, and that only ended up taking me 4 skeins. But yeah, I think that this will be a staple piece for me in New York because it's actually cold here. And now I just have to find like a coat that I can fit this over, because I think the trick to New York is just wearing a bunch of layers so that you can like take it off in the subway or like take it off when you get inside, but then like still have it. I don't know, I need to find a good coat soon, because all the coats that I have are like good coats for Northern California, which is very different weather. Like it gets much colder here. Like already like it's cold. Like it's like 50 degrees here today, and I made the mistake of like wearing bike shorts while walking to the gym, and I was like, ooh, don't do that again. But yeah, because I've been working with like mostly bulky weight, like Aran weight yarns recently, like it amazed me that I finished like this entire sweater so quickly. And again, it is super bulky yarn, so it is supposed to like work up really quickly, and it is cropped. Like I always make things cropped, but this whipped up in like 6 hours. And I was watching Mr. and Mrs. Smith for most of it, and what a movie, man. Like there's no other movie that's like so aggressively like early 2000s like that. I do like that movie, and I actually hadn't seen it since I was like really young, so I don't think I ever watched like the second half of the movie because I couldn't remember any part of that. But now I do. The next whip that I have for you is a Lovesick Sweater, and this is going to be for my roommate, and I decided to make it a smaller bobble version because the first version I made, which was the green one that I showed you guys like last week I think, I made the bobbles a bit too big. So it's great for like if you want a festive sweater, but I also thought that it'd maybe be nice to try and make one with like a smaller bobble as well. So this is the smaller bobble version, and it's in Sandnes Garn Kos Yarn in pink, bubblegum pink. I'll look it up and put it in the description. But I'm really excited to finish this one. Really think that like me using my skein winder to skein up the doubly held Kos yarn really motivated me to finish this one because it just became really pleasant to work with. Because I actually find that like with Kos yarn, when you pull from the center skein, you pull out a lot, and like something about the quality of the yarn makes it so that like it gets really sticky to itself, and then it knots, and then it's just like, it's kind of a headache. But again, if you use your skein winder to skein up the 2 strands together, you deal with all the knotting at the very beginning, and so you don't have to deal with it while you're knitting itself. So keep that in mind. Again, you can totally skein up your yarn if you don't have an electric skein winder, you just need a skein winder. Or even like, if you want, you could also just do it by hand. But I don't really recommend doing that when you have like skeins that are like 400 meters. Anyways, I'm really excited about this one. I just have to do the sleeves, and I'll be honest, like I was kind of slowed down because I was like in the process of like filming the creation of this one just for like reels and stuff, and then like I lost light. So then even though I'd finished the body, I was like, well, I can't work on the sleeves yet because you gotta like film the part without it having sleeves Yeah, and whenever that happens to me, like whenever I have to stop knitting something, like because it's night and I can't get the right lighting, so I can't film the certain part, it like killed my motivation for the project for like a week at least. So I'll be surprised if I finish this one by next week. The sleeves itself will probably take me like half a day. I'm probably gonna focus on my Marco Polo sweater Lite more. But you know, I know my knitting habits at this point. I should. It's been 2 years, and I mean, starting this YouTube also just like helped me document like my own habits of just like realizing, yeah, like I have a lot of whips, but I don't necessarily have all the whips become finished objects. Okay, this one I was super motivated on. So this is a reality check cardigan. And this is also in Sandnes Garn Kos Yarn, but like it's in olive green and it's also held double. And I just adore this color. I mean, I'm wearing a very similar color right now, but I really, really, really love this color. The beauty about this cardigan is that I finished it on a Friday and I got to wear it that Friday night out to dinner. And again, New York really endearing itself to me because of this weather, and also like it's just been so fun being able to finish an object and then immediately get to wear it, because I just couldn't really do that as much in Northern California, and I couldn't really do that in Southern California for sure. And I think the reason with Northern California is just because I was knitting more like statement pieces. I don't know. Like I think that this is a great cardigan because it's textured, but it's like a pretty neutral color, and it's like a pretty like, it's a cute fit. So I can wear it with a bunch of different outfits. And I think that my goal for knitting here is just to knit pieces that I can wear all the time. Now the weather is pretty suitable for it, but also like I think that like my particular design style right now is also a little bit more practical, because it's a lot harder to wear super chunky knits all the time. But you can wear a bulky weight knit like pretty often. And I decided to make this one a little bit more oversized. So this is a medium, just because I was curious about the stitch in a medium, because I have the reality check sweater in testing right now. So I was a little bit iffy on the grading itself because I had to increase each of the sizes from each other a little bit more than I was comfortable with because of the stitch itself. Like you have to do it in blocks of like holes, no holes, otherwise it looks weird. But you don't have to do that with the cardigan as much, but I just decided to keep around the same measurements for each size. So it is a medium, so it's a little bit more oversized on me than I'm used to, but I really, really do love this fit of cardigan, and I've been kind of obsessed with it recently. So expect to see more cardigans in this shape. I think that this winter I'm going to be going through all my sweater patterns and just converting them into cardigans, and just like writing a bunch of cardigans for those sweaters, because cardigans are a lot more practical than sweaters. You can layer them much more easily. Like it still shows like if you're wearing a cute top, and they're just much more practical. But I just love knitting sweaters more. Like my default is to knit a sweater first when I'm like interested in a knit stitch rather than a cardigan. And I'm trying to change that about myself. Just because, again, cardigans are just a little bit more practical, and I find myself wearing more cardigans than I do sweaters. But another thing with this one is that I have to figure out the buttons for it too, because I made buttonholes and everything. But my button collection in New York is extremely limited, so I'm planning to go to a yarn store soon just so I can find some good ones. I don't quite know what type of buttons would look good on this. That's something I'm not very good at, is choosing buttons, because I just don't do it very often, and sometimes I'm like, ooh, this is cute, and my room would be like, no, that's ugly, and I'll be like, oh. Okay, my final whip for you this week is not technically a whip, it's something like of an idea of a whip. So I was playing around with a bunch of hip knit shop fluff yarn, and I can't remember which colorway this is, but I'll put it in the description. And I'm trying to figure out if this is a good texture for a reality check sweater, because I do want to make a second version of that sweater, and I was trying to see if I could do it in a chunky mohair. And I'm kind of undecided because it makes the texture itself and the stitch pretty subtle, but like look how pretty this is. Hip Knit Shop did gift me all this mohair, and I'm really, really, really excited to work with it. I just have to figure out like what I'm going to make with it. But I'm just trying to decide if like this is too subtle of a texture or if it's enough, because the issue is like the mohair on the stockinette, the plain stockinette portion, it is a little bit holy, so it makes the like lace texture portion a little bit less obvious. There's not as much contrast between the two, at least. So I'm trying to figure out if I want to make a sweater with this entire like more subtle texture, or if I should just stick with like another bulky weight yarn, or I could throw in like a DK weight yarn with this one and make it like fluffy but still a little bit more structured. I have to figure it out, because you know what, I do have a really nice like deep blue DK, and let me show you guys. Like, this is a pretty close match, but like this yarn would give it more structure and body, and then I would have a sweater in this color and texture. I don't know. If I did that, I'd have to knit another gauge swatch, and that seems like a lot of work, but maybe I'll just think about it for a little bit. Like, to be honest, like, sometimes when I'm about to try out a new knit stitch and a new yarn and stuff, I know I should knit a gauge swatch, and it's only like 50% of the time that I do. Because sometimes I'm just too excited about the sweater itself, and I'll just like fully send it, and I'll just start knitting it immediately, and it doesn't always work out, because sometimes I'm like, oh, this texture's too subtle. But it does work out enough where I keep on doing it so that the gauge swatch like probability is about 50%. But that is all that I have for you guys this week. It was a nice balance of like finished objects and works in progress. I don't know what it'll be like next week, because now I won't have all day to knit. I will now only have the evenings to knit, because I'll be like employed with a full-time job that's like 9 to 5 or 12 to 8. I don't really know, because technically my company is headquartered in the West Coast, and I'm pretty sure orientation for me is on West Coast time, which is nice, because that means that I don't have to wake up at like 8 or whatever to work, but means I have to work till 8 p.m. But yeah, this was my final hurrah to freedom and just like enjoying my time as a knitter. I really enjoyed it, and I'm definitely gonna miss it, so maybe I'll like just use a bunch of vacation time. I don't know. I don't really know how to be an adult yet, and I don't really know how to have a full-time job. I probably shouldn't take a bunch of vacation days all the time just to knit. Probably. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Happy knitting, and see ya.